In this video, we're going to test all of Huberman's cortisol protocols and rank them by effectiveness, ease of use and how much time they actually take. If you clicked on this video, there is a good chance you've been feeling stressed. Maybe you can't fall asleep or keep waking up during the night. That leads to poor recovery, chronic fatigue, the classic tired but wired feeling. And very often a disrupted cortisol rhythm is part of the problem. So the protocols we're reviewing today might genuinely help. About a year ago my own cortisol rhythm was skewed, and I started following Huberman's recommendations almost religiously, and turned most of them into a daily routine. Fast forward to now, my cortisol looks great, measured with one of the most accurate methods we have, a 4-point saliva test plus a 24-hour urine test. My sleep performance now is close to 100%. Most days I wake up before my alarm and have the energy to train almost every morning, at my 40 years old. So if you feel stuck in that stressed, restless state, trust me, this is fixable. Let's break it down. But before we dive into the protocols, let's quickly review the basic principles. Stay focused is just a couple minutes, but we really need to understand that. First, healthy cortisol follows a very specific daily rhythm. Let me draw it. It's highest in the morning, with a peak about 30 to 60 minutes after waking. This is called the cortisol awakening response. Then it gradually declines throughout the day, and by bedtime it should be very low, near its daily minimum. During the first part of the night, cortisol remains low, especially during deep sleep. Then, in the second half of the night, cortisol begins to rise again, several hours before your usual wake-up time, helping prepare the body to wake up and start the day. If you use a sleep tracker, you should see this pattern. Deep sleep dominates early in the night, that's also when cortisol tends to be at its lowest. Then toward the morning, REM sleep becomes more frequent and cortisol begins its natural rise again as your body prepares to wake up. Now here is the key point. We actually want cortisol to be high in the morning, because a strong morning peak tends to reduce cortisol reactivity later in the day, all the way into the evening. And we don't want cortisol running high in the second half of the day. That said, short, moderate spikes from exercise or excitement are completely normal and healthy. So practically we have two important timing windows. First, 1 maybe 1.5 hours after waking, when it's beneficial to support that natural morning rise, and second, the couple hours before bed, when we want cortisol to stay low and ideally drop as much as possible. That's why all of these protocols are extremely time sensitive, and we split them into two categories. First, protocols that increase cortisol in the morning, and second, protocols that decrease cortisol in the evening. And one more note, if you're a night owl, the exact same principles apply. Everything is just shifted to match your personal wake-up time. A healthy cortisol curve looks the same, it's just moved later. Alright, now let's get into the protocols that raise morning cortisol. Protocol number 1, early morning bright light exposure. It's my favorite. To additionally raise morning cortisol, we need to get sunlight, ideally, or any 10,000 lux artificial light in our eyes within 1 hour after waking up. Ideally, right after we use the bathroom and drink water. We'll touch on how to measure lux using your phone and how to choose artificial light a bit later. Face the sun or the direction where the sun should be, no sunglasses. Blink as much as you want. My time is early morning, but if you wake up when the sun is already high and hurts your eyes, don't look directly at the sun, a bright sky will be enough. Andrew suggests duration 5 to 10 minutes on clear day and 50 to 20 minutes if it's cloudy. The good news, at least for me, it works way faster. Say 4 to 5 minutes when I can see the sun and 6 minutes when it's cloudy. Maybe because we have really bright sun in Bali. And I usually combine it with a quick eye movement routine, which keeps my vision 20/20 in my 40 years of age, so I'm killing two birds with one stone. Remember, it works only within that 1, maybe 1.5 hours after you wake up. That research showed that light exposure boosts cortisol by 50% and immediately suppresses melatonin or sleep hormone, exactly what we need to feel awake. But what if it's cloudy or before sunrise? Good news, even when it's cloudy, the outdoor sky is often still bright enough. And if you don't believe me, you can actually measure it. There are free lux meter apps on iPhone. One example is called Light Meter. You just cover the front camera with a simple diffuser, even a thin piece of tissue or plastic bag, and you can check the brightness outside or from any lamp.
It is ridiculous. I already can see the sun and it's only 6,000 lux. Finally, 10,000. This is strange. It's already 6:45 and we just reaching 10,000 lux and rain started.
Okay, after that confusing brightness data, I started researching deeper and came across a meta-analysis showing that even moderate indoor light, around 800 lux, can increase morning cortisol by roughly 30 to 40% in some studies. So the famous 10,000 lux number isn't a biological threshold. It's just the standard dose used in light therapy research. Lower light still works, but brighter light tends to produce a stronger and faster circadian response. A lot of people wake up before sunrise. I get it. I used to live in Moscow where winter sunlight basically doesn't exist. And I've been above the Arctic Circle during polar night twice. In those cases, the easiest solution is a 10,000 lux artificial light. You can find plenty of panels online starting around $50. Simply type 10,000 lux and press search. I use a video light, which is a bit more expensive and overpowered, but I need it for filming anyway. And hey, if you have a lamp you're happy with, drop the brand name or even a link in the comments, so other viewers can skip the search and find something that works right away. Two important things if you use artificial light. First, lux drops fast with distance. A lamp might be 10,000 lux, but only when it's close. So measure where it gives you that 10,000 lux. Second, light should come from slightly above your eye level. That's because the key receptors involved in circadian signaling respond best to overhead light. Bright light after waking up genuinely transformed my daily life. When I was trying to lock in a consistent sleep schedule, I struggled hard. I'd hit snooze, drift back to sleep, wake up foggy, then feel guilty. So I tried a simple trick. I put my phone far enough away that I had to stand up to turn off the alarm. And once I was up, I went outside immediately, even just for a minute. And here's the deal. If after that I still wanted to sleep, I allowed myself to go back for another 20 minutes. But honestly, I never did. That brief sky exposure was enough to kickstart my morning physiology, even on cloudy days. So effectiveness, 10 out of 10, time 5 to 10 minutes, limbic friction 0, cost from 0 to $50-70 one time for the lamp. This is the most powerful, low-effort protocol to anchor your circadian rhythm, which improves your cortisol curve, your mood, your energy, and ultimately your sleep. So yes, make this your morning ritual. If you need to spend $50-70 once on a light, it's probably one of the best health investments you can make. Okay, hydration is another one Huberman mentions. And honestly, I never even thought of it as a protocol, because I'm naturally thirsty when I wake up. I usually drink water right after I use the bathroom. Now to be clear, research shows that most healthy adults don't experience a significant cortisol spike just from drinking water. After a full night of sleep, we all wake up slightly dehydrated, so drinking water in the morning makes sense. Mostly for hydration and maybe a small supportive effect on alertness. So I'd call this a non-negotiable habit. Not because it's a cortisol hack, but because it helps your body to start the day in a better baseline state. So effectiveness 2, time 1 minute, limbic friction 0, cost 0. No-brainer habit, and despite small cortisol impact, goes to tier 1.
Protocol number 3 is delaying caffeine.
Huberman recommends waiting 60 to 90 minutes after waking before having your coffee. The idea is simple. Cortisol is already naturally high in the morning, so if you drink coffee immediately, you're basically stuck in stimulation on top of stimulation, and over time that can increase dependency and lead to harder energy dips later in the day. Delaying caffeine tends to create a smoother energy curve, especially for habitual coffee drinkers. So if you experience that energy crash about 5 hours after waking up, try delaying your coffee. It might help. And if you tried this and it worked, share your experience in the comments. As a very occasional coffee drinker, I can't really test it by myself. So, quick scorecard. Effectiveness, let's say 5 out of 10. Time 0, cost 0. Limbic friction, anywhere from 0 to 7, depending on how attached you are to your morning coffee. Goes to tier 2 because the effect really depends on your current state. It might be a game changer or just a small improvement, but it's definitely worth trying. We'll come back to coffee again in the second part when we'll talk about reducing cortisol. The sponsor of this video is me, and free way to support the channel is to hit like, subscribe, leave a comment and share this video with your overstressed friend who might need it. Do it right now, please, and let's move on to the next protocol. And protocol number 4, early exercise. Huberman suggests training within roughly the first 3 hours after waking. And I'll be honest, I didn't fully understand his explanation, so I read the meta-analysis he referenced. Let me quickly summarize the findings, and then we'll see how to apply them. First, your cortisol response depends on what you're adapted to. If you do a type of exercise your body isn't used to, the cortisol response is much bigger. For example, if you lift regularly, but suddenly you do a hard high-intensity interval training session, or you start running out of nowhere, or suddenly double your training volume, that novelty spikes cortisol much more. But if you're adapted to the exercise type and intensity, the cortisol rise is usually smaller and more controlled, while other stress performance hormones like adrenaline and norepinephrine do most of the acute work. Second, exercise type matters. In general, moderate resistance training and light endurance sessions produce a smaller cortisol response, while long endurance sessions and high-intensity interval exercises tend to produce larger spikes. 3. Regularity trains your endocrine system. If you train consistently at the same time of day, your body begins to anticipate it. Cortisol can start racing before the workout, almost like a Pavlovian response. So you're not just training muscles, you train your circadian and hormonal system to expect effort at certain time. Fourth, training lowers baseline cortisol unless you overdo it. Regular exercise tends to raise cortisol briefly during the session and sometimes after, but lowers baseline cortisol over time. However, if you overtrain, especially with poor sleep or a calorie deficit, baseline cortisol can drift upward. Okay, how should we apply these awesome pieces of study to our daily life? First, train in the first half of the day, ideally within the first 3 hours after waking. That supports the natural cortisol rhythm instead of pushing cortisol into the evening. Now I know, not everyone can do this. Kids, work, schedules, life happens. So if you have to train in the afternoon or evening, here are the rules. First, leave as much time as possible before sleep. Give your body time to calm down and clear post-exercise cortisol. Second, avoid high intensity or long endurance late at night. Moderate lifting or zone 2 cardio is usually much easier on sleep. Third, don't add sudden volume jumps. Late day hero workouts are the fastest way to spike cortisol and disrupt sleep. Okay, next is the regularity. The more consistent your training time is, the better. Even on recovery days, doing something light at the same time, like a walk, helps anchor the rhythm. And yes, even 10 to 15 minutes of walking counts. Be creative. Get off the bus one stop early, park further away, or just take the stairs instead of the elevator. Small signals compound. And finally, cumulative intensity. Simply don't overtrain. For example, do your high-intensity interval or sprints once a week. Not twice, not every time. Every longevity expert says that you must do Norwegian 4 and sprint to increase your VO2 max. But if you're a beginner, forget about VO2 max for 3 months. Just walk. Remember, moderate intensity exercises lower your baseline cortisol. Overtraining increases your baseline cortisol. Of course, you shouldn't be afraid to spike your cortisol by exercise. In fact, cortisol rise is associated with growth hormone rise. It means you've caused enough damage to trigger adaptation. And we indeed want that additional increase in the morning, but be mindful of recovery. I used to train in the evening, and my sleep was always crappy. I couldn't fall asleep and then couldn't wake up. Switching to morning training made a huge difference for me. I've been working out in the morning for a year and a half now, and I feel way better. The small downside, if I slightly overtrain, I feel sluggish during the day. I solved that by allocating my most demanding high-intensity interval training to Saturday, so I can legally be a bit slower. We need to place exercise optimization into two categories, both raising morning cortisol and lowering evening. So for early exercise, effectiveness 9, time 15 to 90 minutes. Remember, even 15 minutes of brisk walking is already a good exercise for a beginner. Limbic friction, well, how difficult is it to walk 15 minutes? Not too much, right? As much as 1 hour of running for an adapted athlete. So if you dose your workout properly, it shouldn't be harder than 3, maybe 5 out of 10. If it feels more than 5, you're doing something wrong. Simply dial down the intensity. For late exercise optimization, effectiveness 8, time 15 to 16 minutes, limbic friction, it should be below 5 for sure. No hard workouts in the evening. Money from 0 to whatever, gym equipment and so on. Protocol number 5 is grapefruit and black licorice root. These are sometimes mentioned because they can prolong cortisol activity, not by increasing cortisol production, but by slowing how quickly cortisol is broken down. And honestly, neither Huberman nor the research gives a very compelling reason why most people would want this. For the majority of stressed out modern humans, the problem isn't that cortisol disappears too fast. It's usually the opposite: a low or blunted morning peak, a flattened rhythm, or cortisol staying too high late in the day. So I don't see this as a reliable protocol or use case scenario. But if you enjoy grapefruit or licorice as food, fine, just keep it early in the day. But in terms of cortisol optimization, I'd say effectiveness basically 0. Protocol number 6 is occasional cold exposure. Cold showers or cold plunges can definitely spike cortisol, especially when you're not yet adapted. But once you're adapted, the cortisol response tends to become much smaller. Now here's my honest take. Cold exposure is an awesome tool, but I don't really see a practical scenario where you would stop doing it regularly just to become cold sensitive again, only to spike cortisol on purpose. And I also can't imagine someone thinking, I'll do cold plunges occasionally as a cortisol protocol. If you're doing cold exposure, do it for the real benefits: mood and alertness, inflammation modulation, mitochondrial adaptation. Just do it early in the day, because doing it too late can disrupt your sleep. And by the way, I have a full dedicated episode on cold exposure, including the time I accidentally gave myself hypothermia, where I go deep into the protocols and the science.
No, I have hypothermia.
So for cortisol optimization specifically, effectiveness basically 0 out of 10. But for mood and long-term health, 10 out of 10 if you do it safely and progressively. And now protocol number 7, the most powerful of them all. Huberman didn't formally list this as a protocol, but he mentions it many times. Wake up at the same time every day, 7 days a week. Both research and my own experience show that an inconsistent sleep schedule disrupts circadian signaling and leads to hormonal dysregulation. So this one gets a 100 out of 10, tier A++, a consistent sleep schedule. I used to completely ruin my sleep schedule on weekends for most of my life. I only managed to start waking up consistently about a year ago, and that year turned out to be one of the best periods of mental and physical progress in my life. At 40 years old, I now run faster, think sharper, my blood work is great, and keep improving. Okay, we finished with morning cortisol hacks. Let's check evening in the next video, give me 1 week to finish it. Now let's quickly summarize. Bright light within 1 hour after waking up is non-negotiable. If you don't have morning sun, artificial light will work as well. Consistent wake-up time is also a no-brainer. Drink water after you wake up and postpone coffee a couple hours later. Exercise in the morning at the same time, even when you have recovery days. Do simple walking or 15 minutes zone 2 cardio to anchor your hormonal response. If you cannot train in the morning, daytime or evening works as well. Just end your session at least 3 hours prior to bed and avoid high-intensity interval trainings or heroic night workouts. Please try these protocols for the next 7 days and tell me in the comments how it goes, whether it works for you or you run into any difficulties. Okay, see you soon to test together all the evening cortisol hacks. Stay healthy. It's a wrap, that's all. Done is better than perfect.